Is that supposed to be a fighting color? Or are you just trying to make sure the bad guys don't miss you? The young soldier said in a mean way. He was leaning against the old wooden bar. The shiny buttons on his fancy blue uniform caught the dim light. They looked perfect and out of place in a bar that smelled like old beer and peanuts. The old man's name was Frank Carter. He didn't turn his head. He kept looking at the yellow drink in his glass. His hands were big and rough, resting on each side of the glass. He wore an old red shirt. The bottom parts were torn. The cloth was worn thin at the elbows. It was a shirt for working in the yard or fixing fences, not for a Saturday night at the rusty Anchor Bar. But Frank wasn't there to look good. He was just thirsty. "I'm talking to you, Grandpa." The soldier pushed harder. He felt brave because 3 other Marines were standing behind him, laughing. They all looked perfect and fresh. They had just come from the Marine Corps birthday party that ended a few hours ago at the center down the road. They were young, full of energy, alcohol, and the feeling that they were tough because they were wearing the Marine uniform in public for the first time. Frank took a slow sip of his drink. It burned in a good way going down. He carefully set the glass back on the wet ring on the counter. "I heard you the first time, son," Frank said. His voice was rough and low, like rocks grinding together. It was the voice of a man who hadn't needed to yell in 30 years. The soldier, whose name tag said Miller, got angry at the word son. He took a step closer, getting right in Frank's face. The smell of expensive cologne and whiskey came off him. "That's Corporal Miller to you, civilian, and you're being rude to the uniform by ignoring me." Frank finally turned. He looked at Miller. Really looked at him. He saw the short haircut, the sharp crease in the pants, the single row of ribbons on his chest. National defense, war on terrorism, good conduct. It was a baby's collection of ribbons. Frank's eyes, watery and surrounded by deep wrinkles, had no fear in them. They had a deep, tired patience. "Nice uniform, Corporal," Frank said quietly. "Wear it well." He turned back to his drink, ignoring the young man by hunching his shoulders a little. It was the wrong move. Miller, feeling brave from the alcohol and needing to look tough for his friends, slammed his hand down on the bar next to Frank's drink. The glass shook. Liquid spilled over the edge. The bartender, a big man named Sully who had been wiping glasses and watching with growing worry, stepped forward. "Hey, take it easy, guys. He's a regular customer. Leave him alone." "Stay out of this, bartender," Miller snapped, not looking away from the old man in the red shirt. He poked a finger into Frank's shoulder. The red shirt bunched up. "You know, people like you make me sick. You sit here in your work clothes, probably never did a single thing for this country, staring at us like you know something. What's your story, huh? Did you run away from the war? Did you fake being sick?" Frank sighed. It was a long, heavy breath that seemed to shrink his chest. He reached into his back pocket to pull out some wrinkled dollar bills to pay and leave. As he did, his wallet fell open on the bar. A small black and white photo, cracked with age, slid halfway out of a plastic holder. Miller grabbed the wallet before Frank could react. "Give that back," Frank said. His voice dropped lower. Miller laughed, holding the wallet out of reach. "Look at this, boys." He opened it. The photo showed a group of men in jungle uniforms, standing in mud that looked deep enough to swallow a boot. They looked empty inside. Their eyes had a 1,000-yard stare caught on film. Miller looked at the back of the photo where faint handwriting was written. "To the old bear from the survivors of Hill 881, Miller read out loud. He looked at Frank, then burst into loud, braying laughter. "Old Bear, that's your nickname? What, like the stuffed animal? Or because you're slow and hairy?" The other Marines joined in. Their laughter was sharp and mean in the quiet bar. "Old Bear," shouted a private from the back. "Hey, watch out. He might go to sleep on us." "Did you get that name because you liked to sleep in caves while the real men were fighting?" Miller asked, tossing the wallet onto the sticky bar top. It slid into a puddle of spilled beer. Frank stared at the wallet. He didn't wipe it off. He just placed his hand over it, covering the photo of the dead boys. "Bear," Frank whispered, almost to himself. For a split second, the dive bar disappeared. The smell of old beer was replaced by the copper smell of blood and rotting jungle plants. The darkness of the bar became the heavy darkness of thick jungle trees. A roar tore through Frank's mind. Not a human sound, but the scream of a man pushing past the edge of crazy to keep a machine gun firing while the world exploded around him. The feeling of a red headband tight against a sweating forehead, the weight of bodies, the being alone. Then the jukebox kicked in with a country song, and the jungle vanished. Frank was just an old man in a red shirt again, surrounded by boys who thought they were tough. Sully, the bartender, had seen enough. He had known Frank for 5 years. He knew the old man tipped well, drank quietly, and never started trouble. But he also knew that Frank had a shake in his left hand that only stopped when a loud noise happened, like when someone dropped a tray. Then Frank would go perfectly, scarily still. Sully reached under the bar, but not for a weapon. He grabbed his cell phone. He texted a number Frank had given him years ago, written on a napkin. It was a number for emergencies, Frank had said. If he ever fell and couldn't get up, or if he stopped breathing. But this felt like an emergency of a different kind. Sully didn't know who was on the other end, but he typed quickly, "Frank Carter's at the Rusty Anchor. Marines are bothering him. It's getting bad." He hit send, hoping whoever was on the other end cared enough to reply. Back on the floor, Miller wouldn't stop. "You going to cry, old bear? You going to tell us how tough you were back in the Stone Age?" "I'm asking you to leave me alone," Frank said. His hands were gripping the edge of the bar so hard his knuckles were white. "Or what?" Miller challenged. "You'll gum me to death?" Miller's friend, a sergeant who seemed a little more sober but still amused, stepped in. "Come on, Miller. Let's grab a table. He's just a confused old civilian." "No," Miller said, shaking off the hand. "He's being rude. He hasn't looked me in the eye once. He thinks he's better than us." Frank slowly lifted his head. He looked straight into Miller's eyes. The blue of Frank's eyes seemed to darken, like deep ocean water turning to ice. The air around the stool seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I don't think I'm better than you," Frank said. "I think you're lucky. You've never seen what I've seen. You've never had to be what I had to be." Miller blinked, scared for a second by how intense it was, but his ego pushed him forward. He leaned in, his face inches from Frank's. "I think you're full of lies. I think you're a fake with a fake picture in your wallet." 5 miles away at the Grand Hotel ballroom, the music was loud and the champagne was flowing. The Marine Corps ball was ending, but the senior leaders were still in the VIP room. General Michael Iron Mike Stone, a 3-star general, stood in his evening dress uniform. The dark blue jacket with the gold waistband fit him perfectly. His chest had a heavy wall of tiny medals that jingled softly when he moved. He was laughing at a story from a colonel when his helper, a young captain, stepped into the circle. The captain's face was pale. He held up a phone. "Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt. We just got a text from a civilian number. It's about a Frank Carter." The glass of scotch in General Stone's hand stopped halfway to his mouth. The room seemed to tilt. The laughter died in his throat. "Read it," the general commanded. His voice, usually booming and happy, was suddenly razor sharp. The captain read the text. "Frank Carter is at the Rusty Anchor. Marines are bothering him. It's getting bad." General Stone handed his glass to the colonel without looking at him. "Get the team." "Now, sir," the colonel asked, "is everything all right? Who is Frank Carter?" General Stone turned to the room of officers. His face was a mask of cold anger, a look that scared everyone. "Frank Carter is the reason I'm standing here," Stone said. "Frank Carter is the old bear, and if one of my Marines touches a hair on his head, I will burn this entire command to the ground." He walked toward the exit, his cape swirling behind him. "Move!" Back at the Rusty Anchor, things were getting worse. Miller had grabbed the back of Frank's red shirt. "Stand up when I'm talking to you," Miller shouted. Frank didn't move. He was breathing in a pattern, in through the nose, out through the mouth. He was counting backward from 10. He knew exactly how to take apart the human body. He knew that Miller was leaning too far forward, that his balance was off. He knew that a simple backward thrust of his elbow would break Miller's chest, and a follow-up strike would crush his throat. 9. He wanted the boy to go home and live a long life, but the boy was making it very hard. "Get your hands off him!" Sully shouted from behind the bar, reaching for a baseball bat. "You stay back!" the other Marines yelled, stepping between the bar and Miller. Miller yanked on the shirt again. "I said stand up, old man. Show some respect to your superiors." 6. Frank's hand moved. It wasn't a hit. He simply reached up and grabbed Miller's wrist. His grip was like a steel clamp. The strength was shocking, unnatural for a man his age. Miller gasped, his eyes getting big. He tried to pull away, but he couldn't. It felt like his wrist was caught in a machine. "Let go," Miller said, stammering. "You're making a mistake," Frank said quietly. The shake in his hand was gone. Miller, panicked and embarrassed, swung his other fist. It was a clumsy, desperate punch. It scraped Frank's cheekbone, splitting the thin skin. A trickle of blood ran down into Frank's gray beard. The bar went silent. Miller froze. He had just hit an elderly civilian. The reality of his career ending flashed before his eyes, but the adrenaline was still pumping. Frank didn't flinch. He didn't pull back. He slowly turned his head back to Miller, and a small, sad smile touched his lips. "5," Frank whispered. Suddenly, the front door of the Rusty Anchor burst open. It wasn't just opened. It was thrown with such force that the heavy wood slammed against the wall, shaking the framed photos of local sports teams. Blue lights flashed frantically outside, cutting through the smoky darkness of the bar. "Room a 10 hut," a voice bellowed. It was a roar that commanded total obedience, trained into every person in the room who had ever been in the Marines. The 4 Marines, including Miller, snapped to attention instantly. Miller's arm dropped from Frank's shirt. He spun toward the door, his heels clicking together, his back ramrod straight. Standing in the doorway was a group of shore patrol and military police, but they moved aside instantly. Walking through the center was a figure that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. General Stone, in his formal evening dress uniform, looked like a vision of judgment. The gold on his shoulders caught the light. The medals on his chest told a story of 3 decades of war. He didn't walk. He stalked. His eyes scanned the room and locked onto the scene at the bar. He saw the spilled drink. He saw the red shirt. He saw the trickle of blood on Frank's face. The silence in the bar was total. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator. General Stone stopped 3 feet from Corporal Miller. The general was a large man, but in that moment, he seemed 10 feet tall. He didn't look at Miller. He looked past him, directly at the old man on the stool. Miller was shaking. He knew who this was. Everyone knew Iron Mike. Miller was sweating heavily, his eyes fixed on the wall ahead, praying to disappear. General Stone slowly raised his hand. It was a crisp, perfect salute. He held it. He held it for a long 5 seconds. "Sir," the general said. His voice was thick with feelings. Miller was confused. Was the general saluting him? No, that was impossible. Frank Carter slowly turned on his stool. He looked at the general. He reached up with a napkin and wiped the blood from his cheek. He didn't salute back. Civilians don't salute. But he nodded, a slow, respectful nod. "Hello, Mikey," Frank said. The general dropped his salute. He stepped forward, going past the Marines as if they were furniture, and grabbed Frank's hand. He didn't shake it. He held it with both of his own. "I got here as fast as I could, Bear," Stone said. The use of the nickname hit Miller like a physical punch. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like he might faint. The old Bear wasn't a joke. It wasn't a made-up name. The commanding general of the division just used it. Frank looked at Stone's uniform. "You look like a penguin, Mike. A penguin with a lot of shiny stuff." Stone let out a short, wet laugh. "And you look like you've been fighting with children." Stone turned. The smile vanished from his face instantly. He turned on his heel to face Corporal Miller and his friends. The change from friend to executioner was terrifying. "Corporal," Stone said. His voice was quiet, which was worse than shouting. "Sir," Miller squeaked. "Do you know who this man is?" Stone asked. "No, sir," Miller whispered. Stone stepped closer. He leaned into Miller's face. "This man is Master Sergeant Frank Carter, retired, Navy Cross, Silver Star with 2 clusters, 5 Purple Hearts. He's the reason the 3rd Battalion made it out of the Asha Valley in '69. Miller's knees began to shake. He was a special recon team leader. When your father was still a kid, this man was already a hero, Stone continued, his voice rising. They called him Old Bear because when his team was surrounded, he refused to run away. He stayed behind. He held a hill alone for 6 hours against a whole company of enemy soldiers, so his wounded could be saved. Stone pointed a gloved finger at his own chest. I was one of those wounded, Corporal. I was a private. I had a really bad chest wound. This man carried me 3 miles through a storm with a bullet in his own leg. He's not a civilian. He's a living monument. And you? You made fun of him. Stone looked at the red shirt, then at Miller's perfect blue uniform. You're not good enough to wear the same colors as him, Stone spat. You're a disgrace to my Marines. Miller was crying now. Tears ran down his face, mixing with the sweat. Sir, I didn't know. Not knowing is not an excuse for being dishonorable, Stone roared. The sound shook the glasses behind the bar. You attacked an elderly man. You attacked a hero. You're done. Do you hear me? You're done. Stone turned to the MPs. Arrest these Marines. Assault. Drunk and disorderly. Bad conduct. Strip them of their rank. I want them in jail before I finish my drink. Wait, Frank said. A single word stopped the MPs in their tracks. They looked at the general. The general looked at Frank. Frank slid off the stool. He stood up, looking slightly unsteady, but he held his ground. He walked over to Miller. The boy was shaking, terrified. His career in ashes. His life over. Frank looked at the general. Mike, let them go. Stone looked shocked. Bear, he hit you. He drew blood. He's a boy, Frank said. He's a stupid boy who drank too much and wanted to feel big. If you throw him in jail, you ruin him. You throw him out, he becomes bitter. He becomes a civilian who hates the Marines. Frank turned to Miller. Miller couldn't look at him. Look at me, son, Frank said. Miller looked up. He saw the blood on Frank's cheek. He saw the kindness in the old man's eyes that shouldn't have been there. You wanted to be a tough guy, Frank said. Real toughness isn't about how loud you yell or how crisp your uniform is. It's about who you protect. Tonight you attacked someone weak, or what you thought was weak. That's being a coward. Frank reached out and fixed Miller's collar, which was slightly crooked. You want to be a Marine? Then act like one. Protect old men. Don't fight them. Frank looked back at Stone. Don't kick them out, Mike. That's the easy way. Make them earn it back. Give them the worst jobs you have. Let them clean the bathrooms until their fingers bleed. Let them fill sandbags for the whole base. But teach them. Stone stared at Frank. The anger in the general's eyes slowly faded, replaced by the same look of love he had held 40 years ago in a rice field. You haven't changed, Bear, Stone said softly. You're still saving the ones who don't deserve it. Frank shrugged. Someone saved me once. The memory flashed for a second. Not the jungle this time, but a small house in the States years after the war. Frank, drunk, angry, holding a gun. A young officer knocking on the door, refusing to leave until Frank put the gun down. That officer was Mike Stone. Stone sighed. He looked at the MPs. Stand down, he turned to Miller. You heard the man. You're not going to jail, but God help you. You're going to wish you had. You're reporting to my sergeant major at 5 a.m. You'll be on restriction. And every paycheck you earn for the next 6 months is going to a veteran's charity of Master Sergeant Carter's choosing. Is that clear? Crystal clear, sir, Miller shouted, relief flooding his voice. And, Stone added, leaning in close, you will never ever be rude to a civilian again. I don't care if he's a beggar on the street. You treat him with respect because you never know who you're talking to. Yes, sir. Get out of my sight, Stone growled. The 4 Marines scrambled toward the door, their tails between their legs. As Miller passed Frank, he stopped. He didn't know what to do. He looked at the old man. Really looked at him this time. I'm sorry, Miller whispered. I'm so sorry. Frank just nodded. Go on, son. Get better. The Marines disappeared into the night. The bar was quiet again, except for the hum of the cooler and the distant sound of sirens fading away. Stone turned to the bar. Sully, give me whatever he's drinking and put it on my tab. Sully grinned, his hands shaking slightly as he poured a drink. On the house, General, for both of you. Stone took the glass. He unbuttoned his tight uniform jacket and sat on the stool next to Frank, the General and the old bear side by side. How's the hip? Stone asked, sipping his drink. Rain makes it hurt, Frank said. Stone nodded. The shoulder still clicks when I lift my arm. They sat in silence for a moment. Two old warriors in a dive bar, the years melting away. You know, Stone said, swirling his drink, I really was going to destroy them. I know, Frank said. That's why I stopped you. You're too emotional, Mikey. Always were. Stone chuckled. Someone has to be the fire. You were always the ice. Frank touched the photo in his wallet, the one still sitting on the bar top. It was drying out. They just didn't know, Frank said softly. They see an old man. They see a target. They don't see the cost. We have to teach them, Stone agreed. We have to keep teaching them. Frank took a sip of his drink. He looked at the general's reflection in the mirror behind the bar. The medals, the power, the command. Then he looked at his own reflection. The red shirt, the gray beard, the tired eyes. You're doing a good job, General, Frank said. Stone shook his head. I'm just holding the line until the next group comes in. They finished their drinks in comfortable silence. The adrenaline of the fight faded, leaving behind a warm, quiet friendship. When they stood up to leave, Stone insisted on walking Frank to his truck. The cool night air was sharp. The general's personal security team was waiting by a line of black SUVs, watching everything with sharp eyes. Stone opened the door of Frank's rusted pickup truck. Take care of yourself, Bear, Stone said, gripping Frank's hand one last time. Don't make me come down here and punish a bunch of kids again, Frank smiled. I'll try to keep a low profile. Stone stood at attention as Frank started the engine. The old truck coughed to life, spewing a bit of blue smoke. As Frank pulled out of the parking lot, he looked in the rearview mirror. Under the harsh glare of the street lamp, the three-star general was holding a salute. Perfect, stiff, respectful. Frank lifted his hand from the steering wheel and gave a small wave. The next morning at Camp Lejeune, Corporal Miller stood in front of a mirror. He looked at his uniform. He looked at the ribbons. He thought about the old man in the red shirt. He took the uniform off and carefully hung it up. Then he put on his work uniform, grabbed a bucket and a brush, and marched toward the bathrooms. He scrubbed for 10 hours. His back hurt. His fingers got blisters. But every time he wanted to complain, he thought of the Asha Valley. He thought of the old bear carrying a wounded man through the mud, and he scrubbed harder. Weeks later, a package arrived at Frank's small house. Inside was a framed letter of apology, written by hand, signed by 4 Marines. And tucked into the corner of the frame was a new photo. Corporal Miller and his team standing in front of a monument, looking tired, humble, and serious. Frank placed the frame on his shelf right next to the black and white photo of the boys in the jungle. He poured himself a small glass of iced tea, sat in his chair, and watched the sun go down. The old bear rested, happy that the cubs were finally learning how to walk. If you enjoyed this story of hidden bravery and justice, please like the video and follow our channel for more stories like this one. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that respect is earned, not worn.